There is a particular kind of loneliness that begins while you are still surrounded by people. It appears when every conversation becomes a trial in which you must justify your intentions, explain your personality, or prove that your feelings are legitimate. After enough misunderstandings, you start speaking defensively before anyone has even accused you. You carefully arrange your words, anticipate criticism, and reveal only what others are likely to accept. Yet the more you defend yourself, the less anyone encounters who you actually are. Before you go, if you're looking for a simple way to reduce stress and find more inner peace, I have something for you. Check out the ebook, The SIM Method, 5 minutes a day for inner peace and mental clarity. It only takes 5 minutes a day and can help you build a calmer, clearer mind. The link is in the first pinned comment, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to The Trauma of Being for more content like this. They meet an edited version of you, a social identity built to prevent rejection, and you remain alone behind it. From a Jungian perspective, this constant self-defense is connected to the persona, the psychological mask created to secure recognition and belonging. The persona is necessary, but it becomes imprisoning when protecting it demands that you silence everything inconvenient, vulnerable, or socially unacceptable within you. Those rejected parts do not disappear. They gather in the shadow and influence your reactions from beneath conscious awareness. A simple disagreement then feels like an attack on your entire identity, because the person being questioned is not merely you. It is the carefully constructed image upon which your acceptance seems to depend. This video is for you if you are exhausted from explaining yourself to people determined to misunderstand you. Freeing yourself from loneliness does not mean becoming indifferent, cutting everyone off, or pretending that connection no longer matters. It means ending the inner abandonment that occurs whenever you betray your own experience to preserve someone else's approval. As we explore the persona, the shadow, conscious solitude, and psychological integration, we will see why the moment you stop defending an image may also be the moment genuine connection finally becomes possible. You keep defending yourself because you still need to be understood. The need to defend yourself often appears reasonable. Someone misinterprets your silence, questions one of your decisions, or creates a version of your intentions that you do not recognize. You respond by adding context, correcting details, and explaining what you truly meant. But when the explanation fails, you explain again, this time with more urgency, more evidence, and more emotional investment. What began as an attempt to clarify one situation becomes a struggle to control how another person sees you. The real source of your distress is no longer the misunderstanding itself, but the possibility that someone may continue believing something about you that you cannot correct. Behind this reaction is a hidden psychological bargain. If people understand your reasons, they must approve of your choices. Understanding and approval become so closely connected that disagreement feels like proof that you have not explained yourself well enough. You begin searching for the perfect sentence that will finally make the other person recognize your perspective. Yet people do not interpret you from a neutral position. They listen through their histories, insecurities, loyalties, expectations, and projections. No amount of precision can guarantee that your reality will be received without distortion. Constant explanation can therefore become a form of external dependence. Your inner certainty remains suspended until someone else confirms that your interpretation is valid. You may know why you made a decision, but that knowledge does not feel sufficient while another person rejects it. Your attention moves away from examining whether the decision is honest and responsible and toward making it acceptable to an audience. Without noticing, you give other people the authority to determine whether your motives deserve respect. From a Jungian perspective, this dependence is connected to the persona, the social identity through which you seek recognition. The persona wants to appear coherent, reasonable, generous, and morally consistent. When someone describes you in a way that contradicts this image, your defensiveness attempts to repair the fracture. You are not only protecting a particular action, you are protecting the identity you want the world to acknowledge. The intensity of the defense reveals how much psychological stability has been invested in maintaining that identity. This is why certain accusations affect you more deeply than others. An opinion that touches nothing unresolved within you may be dismissed without much effort. But a judgment that approaches a hidden doubt can occupy your mind for hours. You rehearse imaginary conversations, assemble arguments, and revisit every detail because the criticism has activated something you have not fully confronted. The other person may be unfair, but your urgency to disprove them can still reveal an internal conflict that deserves examination. The shadow becomes important at this point. It contains qualities, motives, and emotions that your conscious identity would rather exclude. Perhaps you want to be known as endlessly patient, but you also carry anger. Perhaps you consider yourself independent, yet still fear disapproval. Perhaps you insist that a decision was entirely rational while refusing to acknowledge the resentment beneath it. Accepting these contradictions does not mean agreeing with every accusation. It means becoming honest enough that another person's opinion no longer threatens to expose something you are desperately hiding from yourself. The desire to be understood can also keep you trapped in relationships that offer no genuine curiosity. You continue presenting your evidence to people who have already chosen the version of you they prefer. Every new explanation becomes more material for another argument, while your hope of being recognized keeps you emotionally present. What looks like communication is sometimes a repetitive negotiation for permission to exist outside another person's expectations. The loneliness grows because you are speaking continuously without ever feeling truly encountered. Inner freedom begins when you distinguish between clarification and self-abandonment. Clarification is direct, limited, and appropriate. You state what happened, communicate your intention, and correct important misinformation. Self-abandonment begins when you reshape your experience until it becomes acceptable to someone who refuses to listen. At that point, explaining yourself no longer serves truth or connection. It serves the fear that being misunderstood will make you unworthy, guilty, or alone. You do not become free by refusing every conversation or treating all disagreement as irrelevant. You become free when your self-knowledge is no longer dependent on obtaining a favorable verdict from everyone around you. Some people will understand you, some will interpret you partially, and others will see only what their own psychology permits them to see. When you can tolerate that limit without launching another defense, you recover the energy once spent managing their perception. You can then use it for something far more demanding, understanding yourself honestly enough that you no longer need every observer to confirm who you are. The persona turns every misunderstanding into a personal threat. The persona is the version of yourself that enters the social world. It learns how to speak in particular environments, which emotions can be displayed, which opinions receive approval, and which behaviors protect your place within a group. This social identity is not necessarily false. It allows you to function among people without exposing every private thought or feeling. The difficulty begins when you forget that the persona is only one part of you and start treating its reputation as if it were your entire psychological existence. Once that happens, being misunderstood no longer feels like a limited disagreement between two people. It feels like an attack on the identity you have worked to establish. If you need to be regarded as intelligent, being corrected may feel humiliating. If you need to be seen as kind, someone's disappointment may appear to prove that you are cruel. If your identity depends on strength, admitting uncertainty can resemble defeat. The reaction becomes much larger than the situation because the persona believes its survival is at stake. You may then begin monitoring yourself before anyone has openly criticized you. You examine every message, expression, and pause, searching for signs that another person's opinion has changed. Ordinary silence becomes suspicious. A brief response seems hostile. A difference of opinion is interpreted as rejection. The persona turns social interaction into a continuous evaluation because it depends on predictable feedback to maintain its stability. Instead of participating in relationships, you begin managing the impression you leave behind. This constant management creates a strange division inside you. One part experiences the situation, while another watches from the outside and calculates how the experience will appear. You cannot simply feel disappointed. You must make sure your disappointment looks reasonable. You cannot change your mind without constructing an explanation that protects your consistency. Even spontaneity becomes difficult because every action must pass through the question of how it will be interpreted. The persona is no longer helping you navigate society. It is supervising your existence. Jung understood that excessive identification with the persona produces psychological fragility. The more perfect the public image becomes, the more threatening any contradiction appears. A person who must always seem calm cannot easily acknowledge anger. Someone who must always be helpful may secretly resent every new demand. Someone who builds an identity around independence may struggle to admit the need for support. The rejected qualities move into the shadow, where they continue affecting behavior without being consciously recognized. This explains why a small misunderstanding can provoke a disproportionate response. The immediate event touches everything the persona has excluded. A comment about selfishness may awaken years of hidden resentment. A question about competence may activate a private fear of inadequacy. You respond not only to the words spoken in the present, but also to the unconscious material they disturb. The intensity of your defense may therefore reveal more about your inner division than about the actual importance of the accusation. Other people can also sense when your identity depends on their cooperation. They learn which description makes you defensive, which form of disapproval causes you to retreat, and which compliment restores your attention. This does not mean everyone deliberately manipulates you. It means that dependence becomes visible through repetition. When your behavior changes every time your image is questioned, the social environment begins to organize itself around the version of you that is easiest to influence. Loosening your identification with the persona does not require abandoning manners, responsibilities, or social roles. It requires remembering that none of these roles contains the whole of you. You can be competent and still make mistakes, generous and still establish limits, confident and still experience uncertainty. These apparent contradictions do not destroy identity, they make it more complete. The less you need to appear psychologically flawless, the less power a misunderstanding has to destabilize you. Eventually, you can hear another person's interpretation without immediately treating it as a final definition. You can examine what is accurate, reject what is distorted, and tolerate what cannot be corrected. The persona returns to its proper function, a flexible interface with the social world rather than a fragile mask requiring constant protection. You remain capable of listening and taking responsibility, but you no longer confuse every challenge to your image with a threat to your worth. What others misunderstand may still matter, but it no longer decides whether you are allowed to remain at peace with yourself. Loneliness deepens when you abandon yourself to maintain connection. Loneliness is not always created by the absence of people. Sometimes it develops inside relationships where your presence depends on how successfully you conceal yourself. You remain included because you avoid certain subjects, soften your opinions, suppress your discomfort, and present only the emotions others know how to receive. From the outside, you appear connected. Internally, however, you recognize that the person being welcomed is a carefully adjusted version of you. The relationship offers company, but it does not offer the experience of being known. This pattern often begins with small adaptations. You laugh at something that disturbs you, agree to something you do not want, or remain silent when a boundary has been crossed. Each individual concession appears too minor to challenge. You tell yourself that preserving harmony is more mature than creating tension, but repeated over time, these decisions teach you that connection requires self-erasure. You stop asking whether a relationship can accommodate your reality and begin asking how much of that reality must be removed to keep the relationship intact. The need to belong is not a weakness. Human identity develops through recognition, participation, and emotional exchange. The problem emerges when belonging becomes conditional upon psychological obedience. If disagreement causes withdrawal, if honesty is punished with coldness, or if your boundaries are treated as personal attacks, you learn to associate authenticity with isolation. You begin protecting the relationship by anticipating reactions and removing anything that might disturb the other person's preferred image of you. Eventually, This anticipation becomes automatic. You no longer need someone to tell you what cannot be said because you have internalized the restrictions. Before speaking, you edit your thoughts. Before expressing disappointment, you question whether you are being unreasonable. Before refusing a request, you prepare a long defense designed to make your boundary painless for everyone except yourself. The external relationship is preserved, but an internal relationship is being damaged, your capacity to trust your own perceptions. From a Jungian perspective, the qualities you suppress do not simply disappear. Anger, ambition, grief, disagreement, and the desire for independence move into the shadow when they conflict with the identity required for acceptance. They then emerge indirectly through exhaustion, resentment, withdrawal, or reactions that seem larger than the immediate event. What you refuse to express consciously begins directing your behavior unconsciously. The loneliness becomes deeper because you are now separated not only from other people, but also from rejected parts of your own personality. This inner separation explains why constant company may fail to relieve loneliness. Attention cannot reach the parts of you that remain hidden. Compliments feel strangely empty because they are directed toward the role you perform. Affection may create anxiety because you suspect it depends on maintaining that role. Even when others sincerely value you, you may struggle to receive it, since you cannot be certain whether they value your complete personality or only the version that never disrupts their expectations. Self-abandonment can also make relationships feel like continuous negotiations. You give more than you genuinely want to give, hoping that your effort will eventually create security. You become available before anyone asks, solve problems that are not yours, and tolerate behavior that quietly diminishes you. Yet generosity motivated by fear rarely produces closeness. It creates an invisible debt that the other person may not even know exists. When the expected recognition does not arrive, resentment grows beneath the kindness. Ending this pattern does not require sudden confrontation or complete withdrawal from everyone around you. It begins with noticing the moments in which you leave your own position to secure another person's comfort. You pause before agreeing, name what you actually feel, and allow a respectful boundary to remain without explaining it repeatedly. Some relationships may adjust and become more honest. Others may resist because they were organized around your compliance. Their resistance provides information that your previous self-silencing prevented you from seeing. Genuine connection becomes possible when remaining close to someone no longer requires moving away from yourself. This does not mean expressing every thought without consideration or demanding complete understanding from others. Before you go, if you're looking for a simple way to reduce stress and find more inner peace, I have something for you. Check out the ebook, The SIM Method, 5 minutes a day for inner peace and mental clarity. It only takes 5 minutes a day and can help you build a calmer, clearer mind. The link is in the first pinned comment, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to The Trauma of Being for more content like this. It means participating without treating your inner reality as the price of admission. When you can disagree without feeling that the relationship must collapse, offer care without disappearing into another person's needs, and tolerate disapproval without immediately betraying your position, loneliness begins to lose its foundation. You are no longer waiting for someone else to find you behind the role because you have stopped hiding there. Your shadow contains the truth you are afraid to admit. The shadow is often mistaken for something purely destructive, as if it contained only cruelty, hostility, or impulses that must remain under control. In Jungian psychology, however, the shadow includes everything the conscious personality refuses to recognize as its own. It may contain anger and envy, but it can also contain confidence, ambition, sensitivity, creativity, and the ability to say no. A quality enters the shadow not because it is inherently wrong, but because it conflicts with the person you learned you had to become in order to receive approval and remain connected to others. Every social environment teaches certain rules about which qualities are acceptable. A family may reward obedience while treating disagreement as disrespect. A group may celebrate constant positivity while rejecting sadness or criticism. A relationship may welcome your generosity, but become uncomfortable when you establish limits. To preserve belonging, you begin dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. The acceptable qualities form the persona, while everything that could threaten recognition is pushed outside conscious identity. Repression does not eliminate these unwanted qualities. It removes them from direct awareness, allowing them to influence your choices without being examined. Anger that cannot be acknowledged may become cold withdrawal. The desire for recognition may disguise itself as excessive humility. A fear of rejection may appear as indifference. Because the original emotion remains unconscious, you experience its indirect expression without fully understanding its source. You then defend your behavior because admitting the hidden motive would contradict the identity you are trying to protect. Projection is one of the principal ways the shadow makes itself visible. You may react intensely to arrogance because you have rejected your own desire to be noticed. You may condemn another person's selfishness while refusing to recognize your unmet need for personal space. You may be disturbed by someone's emotional vulnerability because you have spent years suppressing your own. This does not mean every judgment is false. It means that the emotional intensity surrounding a judgment can reveal material that belongs partly to your own psychological history. The shadow also appears in the qualities you admire excessively. You may become fascinated by people who speak without apology because your own assertiveness has been suppressed. Someone else's creativity may seem almost magical because you have treated your imagination as impractical. Their freedom attracts you because it represents a possibility your conscious identity has forbidden. What you idealize in others may therefore be as revealing as what you condemn in them. Both reactions can point toward capacities waiting to be reclaimed. Facing the shadow requires more than repeating that every hidden quality should be accepted. It demands precise honesty about how these qualities operate in real situations. You notice when kindness contains fear, when silence contains resentment, or when an explanation is designed less to communicate than to preserve innocence. This examination can be uncomfortable because it removes the possibility of seeing yourself as entirely reasonable in every conflict. Yet it also prevents you from remaining controlled by motives you refuse to name. Shadow integration is not permission to express every emotion without responsibility. Recognizing anger does not require directing it carelessly at others. Acknowledging ambition does not justify exploiting people. Accepting the desire for independence does not mean abandoning every commitment. Integration allows conscious choice to replace unconscious reaction. Once a hidden quality is recognized, you can determine how it should be expressed, limited or transformed, instead of allowing it to govern you indirectly. This process gradually reduces defensiveness. When you have already admitted your contradictions, another person cannot easily destabilize you by pointing toward them. You can consider criticism without immediately collapsing into shame or launching an argument. Some observations may be accurate, others distorted, and many incomplete. Because your identity no longer depends on appearing psychologically flawless, you can separate useful information from projection without treating either one as a final definition of who you are. The truth contained in the shadow is not that you are secretly worse than you imagined. It is that you are more complex than the persona has permitted you to become. You contain tenderness and anger, courage and fear, generosity and personal need. Psychological maturity does not erase these tensions. It develops the capacity to hold them consciously. As the divided parts of your personality begin to communicate, you no longer need constant explanations to protect an idealized image. You become less perfect in your own eyes, but more complete, and therefore less vulnerable to every judgment coming from outside. Stop explaining yourself and observe who remains. There comes a moment when another explanation no longer creates understanding. You have already stated what happened, clarified your intention, and corrected the most important misunderstandings. Yet the conversation continues because the other person is not searching for clarity. They are waiting for you to surrender your position. Each new explanation becomes an opportunity to question your memory, challenge your motives, or demand a version of the truth that protects their expectations. What appears to be dialogue has become a negotiation over whether your experience is allowed to exist. When you are accustomed to defending yourself, you may not recognize this limit. You assume that if the other person remains unconvinced, your explanation must still be incomplete. You search for different words, offer more personal information, and expose increasingly vulnerable parts of your experience. The hope is that enough detail will finally produce empathy. But explanations cannot manufacture a willingness to understand. They can only provide information to someone who is prepared to receive it. Stopping does not mean that you have lost the argument or admitted that the other person is correct. It means recognizing that communication requires participation from both sides. You can express yourself honestly, but you cannot control the psychological framework through which another person interprets you. Their conclusion may be shaped by fear, disappointment, loyalty, pride, or an old image of you they do not want to revise. Accepting this limitation protects you from spending endless energy on a decision that belongs to someone else. Silence changes the structure of such relationships. When you stop providing constant justifications, people can no longer depend on your anxiety to keep the interaction moving. Some will become more curious and begin listening with greater care. Others will increase the pressure, interpreting your silence as disrespect, coldness, or guilt. Their reaction reveals whether they valued mutual understanding or simply relied on your willingness to defend yourself until you became easier to control. This is why observing who remains is more important than immediately judging who leaves. Some people may need time to adjust because the relationship was built around familiar patterns. A person who genuinely values you may initially feel confused when you stop explaining everything, but they will eventually respect a clear answer and make room for your perspective. Someone invested primarily in compliance may treat your new restraint as a personal offense. The difference becomes visible only when you no longer manage everyone's response for them. The change may also expose your own hidden expectations. Perhaps you believed that being endlessly patient would guarantee loyalty. Perhaps you offered explanations not only to communicate, but also to prevent anyone from being disappointed in you. When you stop, you must face the uncomfortable fact that honesty does not ensure approval. People remain free to dislike your choices, misunderstand your intentions, or create distance. Inner freedom requires tolerating that possibility without rushing back into self-abandonment. In Jungian terms, this restraint weakens an overdeveloped persona. The persona wants to control how you appear because it depends on social recognition. Silence interrupts that control and brings you into contact with the uncertainty the persona was designed to avoid. You cannot guarantee that you will be seen as kind, reasonable, or innocent. You can only examine your conduct, accept responsibility where necessary, and refuse to perform a version of yourself created solely to obtain a favorable judgment. This does not justify ignoring legitimate criticism. "I do not need to explain myself" can become another defensive mask when it is used to avoid accountability. The distinction lies in whether you are refusing honest examination or refusing an endless trial. A mature boundary allows you to listen, recognize harm, apologize when appropriate, and change your behavior. What it does not require is repeating the same defense to someone who dismisses every answer because no answer other than submission will satisfy them. When you stop explaining compulsively, your relationships become clearer. The people capable of respecting complexity do not require you to prove your worth in every disagreement. They may challenge you, but they do not demand that you erase yourself to restore harmony. Those who remain are not necessarily the people who always agree with you. They are the ones who can encounter a difference without turning it into a verdict on your entire character. Their presence feels less dramatic but far less lonely, because you are no longer required to disappear in order to keep them near. Solitude becomes healing when you stop treating it as rejection. Solitude and loneliness may look identical from the outside, but psychologically they are very different experiences. Loneliness is the painful sense that meaningful connection is unavailable, even when other people are physically present. Solitude is a conscious period of reduced social stimulation in which attention returns to the inner world. One leaves you searching anxiously for recognition. The other can help you understand why recognition has become so necessary. The difference is not simply whether you are alone, but how you interpret and use that condition. When solitude is interpreted as rejection, every quiet moment, seems to confirm that you have been forgotten. You check for messages, replay conversations, and search your memory for the mistake that might explain someone's distance. The mind converts the absence of immediate contact into evidence about your worth. Instead of resting from social pressure, you remain psychologically surrounded by imagined judgments. The room may be empty, but your attention is still occupied by everyone whose approval you fear losing. This reaction often reveals how strongly identity has become attached to external responses. When other people are present, their attention provides a temporary sense of definition. You know who to be because their expectations give you a role: the helpful one, the patient one, the entertaining one, or the person who always understands. When those expectations disappear, you may experience not freedom but uncertainty. Without an audience, the persona loses the feedback it normally uses to confirm that it still exists. For this reason, conscious solitude can initially feel uncomfortable. The silence removes familiar distractions and reveals thoughts that were previously covered by constant interaction. Resentments, unmet needs, unresolved disagreements, and desires that do not fit your social identity begin to surface. It is tempting to interpret this discomfort as proof that being alone is harmful, yet the uneasiness may simply indicate that your inner life has been neglected long enough to feel unfamiliar when you finally encounter it. From a Jungian perspective, solitude creates a space in which the dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious can become more visible. Without the immediate demands of the social persona, dreams, memories, emotional patterns, and contradictions receive closer attention. You begin noticing which opinions genuinely belong to you and which were adopted to avoid conflict. You recognize where your generosity is sincere and where it is driven by fear. Solitude becomes useful because it allows these distinctions to emerge without requiring an immediate performance. Healing solitude is not passive withdrawal. It involves giving structure to the time you spend away from social noise. Reflection, writing, reading, creative work, walking, or simply remaining with an emotion long enough to identify it can turn silence into observation. The purpose is not to analyze yourself without end, but to recover contact with experiences that constant explanation has displaced. Gradually, your own company stops feeling like an empty waiting room where you remain until someone else returns. There is also an important difference between solitude and avoidance. Solitude is chosen to restore clarity before returning to relationships with greater honesty. Avoidance uses distance to escape every uncomfortable conversation, responsibility, or possibility of being challenged. If being alone becomes the only place where you feel safe, isolation can reinforce the very fears it was meant to relieve. Healthy solitude strengthens your ability to participate in life. It does not require you to permanently retreat from it. As your relationship with solitude changes, silence stops carrying the same meaning. A delayed response no longer automatically feels like rejection. An evening alone does not become evidence that everyone else has moved on without you. You become capable of experiencing absence without immediately turning it into a judgment about your value. This creates emotional space for relationships to breathe, because other people no longer have to provide continuous reassurance in order for you to remain internally stable. Eventually, solitude becomes a form of preparation for genuine connection. You return to others with a clearer sense of what you think, what you can offer, and what you cannot continue pretending to accept. You need less performance because your identity has developed a foundation beyond immediate approval. The loneliness begins to loosen, not because you have convinced yourself that you need nobody, but because you no longer approach relationships as someone asking to be rescued from their own company. You can seek connection from desire rather than desperation, allowing closeness and individuality to exist together. You leave loneliness behind when you no longer betray yourself for belonging. Belonging becomes psychologically dangerous when it requires you to negotiate against yourself. You begin accepting what disturbs you, remaining silent when something important should be expressed, and adjusting your personality to fit whatever a particular relationship can tolerate. These concessions may preserve your place temporarily, but they create a deeper form of loneliness. You are surrounded by people, yet the person participating in those relationships is increasingly disconnected from what you genuinely think, feel, and need. Self-betrayal rarely begins as an obvious decision. It appears in ordinary moments when you agree before considering what you want, apologize for emotions that require no apology, or pretend not to care because honesty might create tension. Each moment seems small enough to overlook, but repetition turns accommodation into identity. Eventually, you become known as the person who never objects, never needs much, and always understands. Others may appreciate this version of you without realizing how much of yourself you had to suppress to create it. The approval gained through this pattern never feels entirely secure. Because acceptance depends on performance, you must continue performing to preserve it. A new boundary might disappoint someone. An unfamiliar opinion could change how they perceive you. Even personal growth becomes threatening because becoming different may disturb relationships built around your previous role. You remain connected, but the connection demands constant monitoring, leaving little room for psychological development. From a Jungian perspective, individuation requires separation from the collective identities that once defined you. This does not mean rejecting society or declaring yourself independent of every human bond. It means discovering where inherited expectations end and your own psychological position begins. Without this distinction, belonging becomes conformity. You live according to roles supplied by family, culture, friendships, or social approval, while gradually losing contact with the inner authority capable of evaluating those roles. The return to yourself may initially create conflict. People who benefited from your compliance may describe your boundaries as selfishness. Those accustomed to immediate explanations may interpret restraint as distance. Someone who knew only your persona may insist that you have changed, as though change itself were evidence of betrayal. Their reaction does not automatically mean they are malicious, but it reveals how strongly the relationship depended on a version of you that no longer represents your complete personality. This stage requires careful honesty because self-respect can easily be confused with defensiveness. Refusing self-betrayal does not mean assuming you are always correct or dismissing anyone who disagrees. It means remaining available to reflection without surrendering your perception simply to end discomfort. You can listen to criticism, recognize mistakes, and make repairs while still refusing to abandon a legitimate boundary. Responsibility asks you to examine yourself. Submission asks you to erase yourself. They are not the same. As this distinction becomes clearer, relationships begin to reorganize. Some connections deepen because honesty replaces silent resentment. You discover that disagreement does not always destroy closeness, and that people capable of genuine respect can adapt to a more complete version of you. Other relationships may become more distant because they cannot function without your previous compliance. Although that distance can be painful, it also ends the exhausting task of keeping a connection alive through continuous self-suppression. The loneliness that follows self-betrayal begins to weaken when you can remain present without performing. You no longer have to anticipate every reaction, create explanations before speaking, or prove that your needs are reasonable enough to exist. Your attention becomes available for actual contact rather than impression management. Others encounter someone more defined, and you become able to recognize who is responding to your reality rather than to the service your persona once provided. Leaving loneliness behind does not mean reaching a life in which you are permanently understood. No relationship can remove every distance between two inner worlds. It means no longer increasing that distance by hiding from yourself first. When belonging is no longer purchased through self-abandonment, connection becomes a meeting between distinct people rather than an agreement to maintain a convenient role. You may still experience moments of solitude and misunderstanding, but you will not be absent from your own life, and that is where genuine belonging begins. The exhaustion you feel may not come from being alone, but from spending too much time defending a version of yourself that was created to remain acceptable. Every unnecessary explanation places your identity in someone else's hands. Every silenced boundary teaches you that belonging must be earned through self-abandonment. Jung's psychology reveals a different path. Not the rejection of other people, but the integration of the persona, the shadow, and the parts of your personality that were suppressed to preserve approval. Stopping your defense does not mean becoming cold. refusing accountability, or believing that every criticism is an attack. It means learning to distinguish honest dialogue from the endless demand to prove your worth. You can listen without surrendering your perception, acknowledge a mistake without condemning your entire identity, and allow someone to misunderstand you without turning their opinion into your inner truth. When you no longer require a favorable judgment from everyone, solitude stops feeling like punishment and becomes a place where your own voice can finally be heard. The freedom from loneliness begins when you stop leaving yourself behind to keep others close. If this video describes something you have been experiencing, subscribe to the channel and share your reflection in the comments. What part of yourself have you been defending or hiding just to be understood? Your answer may help another person recognize the same pattern in their own life.